Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John
or Dean
or Harry, let's do that big job right. Let's get in step with the guy that's hep, get in step with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington.
It's all about how you sell that message. Now, I understand this will come as a shock to every single person watching me now. You will not be able to tear the image from your mind of something so unbelievable, something so incredible that it makes the mind boggle at stunning speeds. Brace yourself, America. Politicians lie. Yes, as difficult as that may be to understand, politicians lie from time to time. And they do so fully protected by the law of the land. Shocker, I know. Welcome to MidPoint, professor of political science at Hamline University, professor at the Minnesota School of Law, and author of the recent commentary carried in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, other places as well. Is there a First Amendment right to lie in politics? David Schultz. Professor, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Professor, whatever would drive you to write such an incredibly, unbelievably, undeniably fantastical interview and column that there's lying in politics? My goodness, man, what could have started you on this path?
Well, first, we ought to start with the fact that you said, yes, in fact, we do have lying in politics, and it's not something that's recent. It's something that's been going on since the beginning of the American Republic. And the question really is, what do we need to do about it? And there's sort of a couple of ways that I approach the question here. Is to first ask the question right off the bat. In our private lives, do we consider it to be wrong to lie or unethical to lie? And most of us would say yes, except for some narrow circumstances. And in government, generally, we say that it's not okay for the government to lie. So the real question is, should it be okay for politicians to lie? And that's the starting point of the piece in terms of should it be okay for them to lie? And then if we think that it's not okay for them to lie, what's the remedy? What should we do? And my piece starts off by basically saying that they shouldn't be allowed to lie either. And now the question is why? Why shouldn't they be allowed to lie? And perhaps then at that point, what's the remedy? What should we do about it? Does the First Amendment, is there a right to free speech to be able to lie?
Well, let's start there. The First Amendment right to lie. And in the article, as you correctly point out, that according to the Supreme Court, it's okay, not a problem. Go ahead and lie, correct?
Correct. Now, there's up to a certain point, there is a Supreme Court case from back in the 1960s, New York Times versus Sullivan, which is all about libel and slander of public figures. And in general, what the standard is that clear lies where you intend to lie, where you have malice, those are not protected by the First Amendment. And so I take that as the same starting point also, that in general, that anything that is clearly a lie, an intentional lie, shouldn't be protected by the First Amendment. But recent court cases in the United States, including a recent Supreme Court case saying that it's okay for a group to go and challenge an Ohio law that makes it illegal to lie, is sending a clear signal that suggests that the Supreme Court, if it were to hear this case, would basically strike down laws making it illegal to lie in politics. And for both people on the left and the right, on both sides, no one gets to claim a monopoly of virtue on this one. On both sides, both are saying at this point that they think that law should go. That essentially they're saying they think there ought to be a First Amendment right to lie.
All right, now let's look at that. And you mentioned a word in there which I think is always very important. And as I like to tell people many times on this show, I am not an attorney. I just play one on TV. You use the word malice in there. And when we look at some of the political ads that are out there right now from people like Barack Obama, people like Mitt Romney, isn't it still fair to say that the most dangerous thing to try to prove, and the most difficult thing to prove many times, is whether there is malice aforethought?
Yeah, it's very difficult to do it. And I want to point out to people that all the time the court system has to make judgments about truth and about credibility of witnesses. Anytime two people appear before a judge, always a judge or a jury is going to have to make decisions and figure out what is the truth, who's lying, and so forth. And so it's the same thing here, that in terms of what a court would have to figure out is the person willfully lying? And part of it gets down to, again, think about what the difference is between a lie versus a mistake. If I think, for example, simple example. If I just really think 1 + 1 is 3, and I tell you 1 + 1 is 3, and I really believe it, is that a lie? No, because we want to say it's something factually untrue with some kind of intent to deceive. If I really think 1 + 1 is 3 because I'm a bad mathematician, it's not a lie, even though it's untrue. And it's the same thing here. Not only would we have to show that something was untrue, but in the process, a person knew or should have known that what they were saying was false. And that's a standard under New York Times versus Sullivan, and that perhaps ought to be the same standard that applies in politics, is that we ought to hold people to a standard of conduct, an ethical standard of conduct and a legal standard of conduct that says that if you intentionally lie, if you say something that's untrue with the intent to deceive, that we ought to hold you accountable for those actions in the same way that we would hold people accountable if they lied on a witness stand or if they lied in any other context.
I'm going to take exactly what you said here, because you have all these political ads, whether it's the president, whether it's somebody who's running for dog catcher, and a lot of times you will see or hear the line that, "I approve this message." Now that immediately implies that the individual who is being represented here looked at the message, checked it out, knew exactly what was there, and is saying, "That's exactly how I feel. Those are my thoughts. That's my opinion." Wait a minute now. If we're going to go to lie versus a mistake, isn't that a flat-out lie if you say you've approved the message?
Well, perhaps it should be. Again, the reason why we have that disclaimer on there, that's supposed to be a way to discourage people from lying. It's also supposed to be a way to try to give the public more information regarding whether or not these are candidate ads or ads run by third-party groups. And so part of this grows out of the McCain-Feingold law in terms of trying to provide the public with more information. But what those ads hit at is something very important, is that we're looking at a point right now in politics where there's significant anonymity in terms of the political ads. A lot of times people or organizations aren't making clear who they are. They might have these very nebulous names like Citizens for a Better Tomorrow or something. And so not only do we not know who those individuals are or groups are, oftentimes they're making dubious claims, and it becomes very difficult for the public to be able to sort out sort of the fact from fiction, truth, and so forth. And what we really need is more disclosure. What we need is more disclosure in terms of informing the public about what's going on. Additionally, the reason why I make the argument about saying that maybe the First Amendment shouldn't protect political lies is think about how we try to promote political virtue. There's got to be two ways. One, we rely upon the political integrity of individuals and groups to be truthful and to play fair. But that's not enough. You probably also need some type of structures in place to encourage that. And that's my argument here, is that we have to rely both upon integrity, but integrity plus some type of wall. Because if we have no wall that defines the outer limits regarding whether or not somebody can lie, then clearly what we're going to lead to a situation is where anything goes. And some people may say that's okay. Maybe we just at that point let the free market of ideas, maybe we let voters decide, but that does not seem to be a mechanism that's working very effectively these days in terms of policing perhaps the truth content of our political system.
All right, couple of minutes I got left here. You mentioned wall. Is it not simply, and I always come back to this because one of my big things is always personal responsibility, but is it not as simple as to say that sometimes that wall that usually is built with lies, fabrications, half-truths, whatever it might be, mistakes, can be so easily knocked down by an educated public who simply today in the 21st century has the ability to find out the facts and all too often just allows themselves to be punch drunk in being taken aside by these ads and believing, oh, that's got to be right, that's got to be right, he said it, that's got to be right. It's the public still that needs to be intelligent enough to drive through it and get the truth. How am I doing so far?
Well, there's no question that a democracy functions upon an educated citizenry, and that we really need to make sure that citizens are empowered to be able to help sort this through. That's one of several pieces that are in the puzzle. But at the same time, we have to recognize, especially in the era of social media, in the era of sort of the Facebooking of the world at this point, that information gets out there very rapidly and just sort of circulates incredibly in terms of like urban legends or urban myths. And oftentimes, either the public isn't equipped for a variety of reasons, or ideas or thoughts get out there very, very fast. And it makes it difficult, especially near the end of a campaign, for example, for for either the public or for candidates to be able to respond to this information. And so I clearly agree with you in the sense that one part of the component is that we need to do better civic education in our society to make sure that people are able to sort through this information. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. A democracy has several components: educated public, the integrity of the people running for office, and structures in place that help promote a fair democracy and make sure that that marketplace of ideas operates correctly.
Well put, Professor. I'm with you all the way on this. I thank you so much. A fascinating article indeed. Is there a First Amendment right to lie in politics? Professor David Schultz, thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, and something else I do want to point out, a line that he says in this article, which I think is very, very salient. Surveys indicate that a majority of Americans think quite a few politicians are crooks, and barely a quarter of the population trusts the government. Take that to the bank for a moment. Next up, what is just as dangerous and perhaps more so than drunk driving? You might be a little shocked at this one. MidPoint continues right here on the Newsmax TV network.